Okay. There we go. We are on the Legal Aid Facebook Live.
I had to change my glasses. Needed my blue lens.
Victoria, we're all good on that now.
I didn't even look. I was like, so I don't need to.
Valerie says we're live now.
On Facebook?
Yes, there are
Okay.
16 people, I believe, now. And we're waiting to begin it at 4 p.m., right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, it looks like it's 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Everyone, thank you for coming along. We're excited about this. My name is Jaden Atkins. I'm an attorney with Legal Aid in the Economic Justice Work Group, and along with my colleagues here, Trevor Hawkins, Nikki Clark, and Victoria Frazier, we all work on unemployment cases with Legal Aid. So we thought that we've heard from a lot of people that have a lot of questions, generally speaking, that aren't always cases that we can take, but sometimes it's just general advisement that people are looking for, and we thought that this would be a good way to get some general answers to general questions that people have. So the way that we're going to structure this is the first half is going to be each of us taking turns talking about some general, start with more general advisement on the unemployment programs and eligibility, then go through and kind of talk about some problems that we've been seeing as things have been updated. And then in the second half of this, we're going to take questions from the chat. So you can go ahead and put your questions in the comments if you'd like. We'll be watching for those, but we will not be addressing them until the question and answer period in the second half of things. All right, Victoria, you ready?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As my colleague Jaden Atkins stated, my name is Victoria. I am an attorney with Economic Justice. And to start things off, I just wanted to provide an introduction of what unemployment is and what pandemic unemployment assistance is. I think that one of the issues that we have continued to see is that there is some folks who are in limbo. They're either at a place where they've applied for unemployment insurance or applied for pandemic unemployment insurance, and they're just not 100% sure if they are eligible for both, if they're eligible for one or the other. So very briefly, just to recap what traditional unemployment is unemployment benefits that are intended to provide temporary financial assistance to unemployed workers who meet certain requirements under Arkansas law. So just to kind of go through those requirements, applicants must be eligible, and to be eligible, you have to have worked a certain period, earned at least a minimum amount of wages. A lot of the time that's about 4 to 5 months. I've done the math. And so if you maintained a job for about 4 to 5 months before applying for unemployment, you meet that first prong. Secondly, you must have been or come into being unemployed through no fault of your own. And I'll break that down a little bit more. And so in the last prong is just that you must be able and available to work and actively seeking work. So just to kind of run through them really fast and in a snapshot way, you must have worked a certain period of time, which is normally 4 to 5 months. You must have not lost your job due to any misconduct or fault of your own. And you must be able and available to work and actively seeking work. So to kind of talk about misconduct just a little more, because we have received some cases where folks are applying for unemployment and then finding out that they do not qualify because of misconduct. So misconduct can come in a form of different ways. You can be considered terminated due to misconduct for failing a drug test, for willfully disregarding your employer's interest, for not following sexual harassment or safety policies that the employer has in place, or for violating your employer's attendance policy after repeated warnings. So misconduct can come in a flavor of different ways, if you will. So it's important to understand that if you are fired or if you are terminated due to misconduct, you do not qualify for traditional unemployment, as we say. So, and we all know that traditional unemployment issues aren't really the reason most of you are here. Most of you are here because of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which we also coin as PUA benefits. So what really distinguishes traditional unemployment and pandemic unemployment is the fact that traditional unemployment is a state-funded program, whereas pandemic unemployment assistance is a federally funded program. So the pandemic, it's in the title, Employment Assistance Program, was in response to the pandemic, to the COVID-19 pandemic. So because this isn't funded by state, it is governed by federal laws. And it is being paid out of the federal treasury. It's not coming out of state taxes or state employer paid taxes. So the intention of the PUA pot, if you will, was to cover those who weren't traditionally, they didn't qualify for traditional unemployment. So what I just said before, when we opened up with talking about what traditional unemployment was, I broke it down and explained, how do you get it? How are you eligible for it? This is for those folks who don't qualify for that. You didn't fall into any of those categories, and there is a connection to COVID-19. Again, just to make sure we're still all on the same page, you can't have been terminated due to misconduct still, okay? So the federal funded program, PUA, it does qualify, or it does include workers who work in the gig economy, those who are self-employed, part-time workers whose earnings were too low to qualify for that unemployment traditional UI benefit, and full-time workers who did not work at the job long enough. So you remember how I said that 4 to 5 month range. If you didn't fall under that 1, 2, and 3 prong that I gave before, you may qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance if you lost your job in any way connected to COVID-19. And there are a few connectors that the statute defines as connected enough to COVID-19. So I want to go into that as well. It's not really just an open-ended, like you can't just make that argument that, oh, I lost my job because of COVID-19. They have some very set guidelines in place on how they determine if it's connected enough to COVID-19 to qualify for PUA eligibility. So eligibility for PUA is restricted to a person who is not eligible for traditional unemployment benefits and they lost their job to something connected to the COVID pandemic, such as these connections include being diagnosed with COVID, being advised or ordered to quarantine, having a household member diagnosed with COVID, school or childcare facility closures, workplace closures or layoffs, or job offers that were rescinded or taken away from you due to COVID. So as long as all of these things took place as a result of COVID, then they consider that as connected enough to the COVID-19 pandemic to qualify or to make you eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. So, and I think it's, worth kind of just mentioning how long the pandemic unemployment assistance was to be in effect. So it's effective from January 27th, 2020 through now, March 13th, 2021. And of course, there is some, they may extend it further. There is some policies and things being proposed to see if that can go beyond the March deadline. But as of right now, the time period that PUA is in effect is from that January 27th of 2020 through March 13th of 2021. And so with that being said, if you do qualify for PUA and you have not been informed, if you have not been denied, or if you're still waiting for a termination letter, if you do find out that you qualify for PUA, understand that you are still eligible to be paid between that January 27th and March 13th as of now. So with that said, I'm sure if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in our chat, and we will circle back and I will do my best to answer. But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Trevor Hawkins.
Thanks, Victoria. Appreciate everybody for getting on here. Looks like we got at least 45 folks watching. And I think, as Jaden said earlier, if you have questions, certainly feel free to share those, and we'll get to them at the end. Hopefully, some of the questions that I've been seeing, I expect we will get to along the way there, and hopefully answer those. But no, definitely stick around for the end here. We'll spend some time with y'all. So, there's been, the Department of Labor has been issuing guidance along the way. This program, along with various other things, have been very fluid, and different factors have come into effect along the way as far as who's eligible and who's not. And I wanted to mention a few of the most relevant for right now, and some of what are newer ones that you may have not heard of. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about them in order, but so back in August 27th, 2020, the Department of Labor issued some guidance that changed PUA eligibility for individuals who are claiming, or for individuals who would want to claim PUA as a result of a school or facility closing in direct correlation to COVID-19. Prior to that, it was a little bit more general, and it was just the school closed, or was there remote learning, therefore that was that qualifying event. On August 27th, they split it up into 3 different factors or variations, and determine whether you're eligible based on which one you fall into. Obviously, on the far end of the spectrum is that the school's completely closed as a result of COVID-19, and everything is online. If there was a need for ongoing and constant attention, having that involvement in that remote learning process, that's certainly still something that would make you eligible for PUA, and is akin to the original intent there. The second, and kind of the middle approach, is when the schools adopt a hybrid environment, as they call it, where part of the time it's remote and the other part of the time it's in person. And how that gets split up just depends, but the point there is, if there is still that remote learning environment, and once again there's that ongoing constant attention that's needed for you and the child, it's remote learning, that can still make you eligible for PUA. But if you are earning some on the side in the meantime there, it's certainly important to report that. And then finally, when the school is just completely open and it's just left full discretion of whether it's in person or it's totally in person, and then online, it's generally no longer a situation where you would be eligible for PUA. And certainly in the mix of those, if there are situations where you are able to work from home, that can affect your ability to, and like I said, it's based on your earnings there, and you have that duty to report that. Now, some of the more recent changes or guidance issued on February 25th, has updated and created some new pathways for PUA eligibility. And some of the more relevant ones there are if you're offered to return to work, or you have a job offer and you have to turn that down because it poses some sort of health threat. Maybe that employer is not following public health guidelines or safety measures. As long as there's some sort of nexus there, that can be a pathway for eligibility. And another more relevant one, and this one is totally new, is for individuals that are experiencing a reduction in hours or temporary or permanent layoffs as a result, like I said, a direct result of COVID-19. Now, in a lot of cases, this would have made you eligible for traditional UI or unemployment, state unemployment. But the intent here is that if you've exhausted all of those previous benefits and still fall into that category there, it's going to make you give you a new pathway to eligibility for PUA or any of the other programs there. So that's definitely one for folks to keep in mind, pay attention to. Now, obviously, in the mix here, they have pulled back on or clarified that if you are working from home, there's no reduction in pay. Your income is as it was. You're not eligible for the PUA, the unemployment in that case. But if there is that loss there, that would make you qualify. Now, one most interesting for me is the guidance that was issued in early January, I believe it was the 7th, by the Department of Labor, that dealt with how the Division of Workforce Services is supposed to treat backdating of claims. And as Victoria mentioned, you have to start, to get to PUA eligibility, you have to start with the UI application. And there's been a lot of inconsistencies that we've seen prior to this guidance and how the state was treating those denials and then applications for PUI. So this early January guidance clarified that for anyone who has applied for state unemployment prior to December 27th, 2020, and are subsequently denied, the state's supposed to go back and backdate their subsequent or their following PUA application to whatever that date was that they originally applied. So, and that can go as far back as February 2nd, 2020, I believe. But, say someone applied in August and a decision was just recently made and then they had to apply for PUA. As long as they met the PUA qualifying event all the way back to the August date, then it should be treated as an application all the way back to there. Now, for anybody that's applied after December 27th, I believe the farthest it can go back is just December 1st, 2020, but it's still supposed to follow the same guidelines there. As long as you qualified, it should go all the way back to at least December 1st. And I know the state's been working on, or was working late January on implementing that process, and we haven't seen a whole lot of how they've been doing that or if they've been following that in total accordance with the guidance. So, folks, certainly let us know if you're seeing anything that doesn't line up with that. Now, the reason I talk about that one last is transferring over to overpayment issues. And a very common overpayment situation that we've seen, and then I'll transfer it to hand it over to Nikki to talk about other ones. But we've seen these situations where someone has applied for UI and maybe they were approved for a period of time and received benefits, and then the state later determined that they should not have received unemployment, so they go back and apply for PUA, and they're not approved for PUA back to when they first applied for the state unemployment. And if you treat the PUA application as the guidance from earlier this year, that would indicate that they should have gone all the way back and looked at the beginning to determine whether you met PUA eligibility from the beginning. And what happens is folks are getting overpayments for regular unemployment and then are being approved for the PUA right when they determined no longer eligible for the state unemployment, and it causes this issue of where they owe all this money, but they're getting paid some through PUA, and there's just no, up to recently, there's not been any way to deal with that we have been aware of. And I'd be interested to hear in the chat if anybody's seen or coming to that situation and it was worked out, but I suspect not. But just always be, I bring that one up just because if you are denied and then you're not, and then you apply for PUA, you need to be clear with them or make sure they understand that they need to, if you qualified for PUA all the way back to that original application, that they are considering it for that. So, and with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Nikki Clark, to discuss some of the other overpayment issues that we've seen.
Hello, everyone. As Trevor mentioned, a lot of the cases that we are seeing from different clients about their unemployment benefits have been overpayments. So that essentially means that at some point you were granted initial benefits, and then due to some reason, the unemployment office later says, no, you actually weren't eligible for those benefits. Now you owe us that money back. So some of what we have been seeing is that there is a delay in the employer getting information to DWS. Once you apply for benefits, your employer has a certain amount of time to send over information to DWS that either says, yes, this is, which that just kind of explains the reason that you no longer are working there. And recently there have been delays with DWS in getting those employer responses. So once that deadline has passed, a lot of times DWS is granting those benefits to different people. And then once they get the information from the employer and you're deemed to have not been eligible for benefits, then you'll get that overpayment letter stating that you actually weren't eligible and that you weren't eligible, and so now you owe that money back. We've also been seeing, as Trevor stated before, individuals applying for regular unemployment and then later finding out that they may not have been eligible for regular unemployment and then apply for the PUA as well. And then also we have seen issues of people applying for unemployment and due to the pandemic, not being technically available for work. And that could be due to your own health and safety concerns, or if you're living with someone that may be more susceptible to catching COVID. And so you're opting not to take on certain jobs because they would present a problem for yourself or some of the people that you may be living with. And so a lot of times people are granted initial benefits and they may get a job offer later that could potentially, increase their risk of getting COVID-19. And at that point, you've essentially turned down a job. And so at that point, sometimes, or some of the cases we have seen is that you're no longer available for work. And so if you receive benefits during that time, then you may be deemed to have been overpaid or ineligible. I do want to say, if you do get a statement that says you've been overpaid or your benefits are being terminated, you have a certain deadline to appeal that decision. So I know some people are concerned about getting these overpayment letters and wanting legal representation. Please feel free to continue to reach out to us, but make sure that you go ahead and appeal those benefits so that you're not waiting on a decision from us and miss your window to appeal. So Trevor, I think. Okay, Trevor, did you have anything else to add before I speak about some of the changes from December?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Alrighty. So as everyone knows, another relief package was passed in December, and so that extended a lot of the deadlines and benefits that we're seeing. So first off, the December relief package provided for an 11-week extension for regular unemployment benefits as well as pandemic unemployment benefits. So what that means is it increases your eligibility period up to 50 weeks. So you could potentially receive benefits for up to 50 weeks. Another change is that the December relief package provides for a $300 per week supplement to regular and PUA benefits. And so with that, beginning the week of December 26th until March 14th of 2021, anyone that is eligible during that period will receive the $300 per week supplement. The December relief package also provided for new benefits called Mixed Earners Unemployment Compensation. And so what that does, it provides an additional $100 per week in benefits for those receiving either regular unemployment or PUA. And it is primarily for those individuals that are self-employed and they received at least $5,000 of self-employment income in the most recent taxable year ending before you applied for regular unemployment benefits. And so if you qualify under the Mixed Earners Unemployment Compensation Program, you get that $100 per week benefit in addition to your regular unemployment and the $300 per week supplement. And so those payments will continue through March 14th of 2021. And so those are the updates from the December relief package. So now I will pass it on to Jaden.
Thanks, Nikki. So unfortunately, the path to implement those changes that Nikki has talked about with the December relief package has been a little rough. We've seen a number of problems with implementation. And I kind of wanted to go through some of the common problems that we've been seeing and how to avoid or get around them if at all possible. So first of all, we've seen significant delays in the implementation on the front end of this. As I'm sure, and many, if not all of you know, that extra $300 per week payment, as well as the extension, a lot of people didn't receive those until the early February is when that started. But a lot of problems are still continuing. A lot of people haven't seen that extension or the $300 per week extra. Maybe you haven't been receiving anything at all in the meantime, even though those changes are now officially live as of early February. First of all, many of you have likely received emails from GWS requesting that you upload copies of your IDs. Federal guidance does require that anyone who applied after December 27th should have their ID verified. and that's anything that's receiving any sort of federal funding. So that should be PUA, PEUC, UI, any of those that are receiving federal funding on top of or just federal funding should have to have their ID verified. However, those that confirmed their identification for claims prior to that date shouldn't have to provide their IDs. So that means, if you applied for PUA back originally in August and you've been receiving it since then, and you did at some point in that process have to provide your ID, theoretically, at least, you shouldn't have to provide that ID again. However, we've heard from many people that they're being required to provide their ID even though they applied and provided their ID prior, as well as that they've already provided their ID since these changes came about, and haven't seen any movement in spite of this. So people received their first rounds of emails from the UIdentify service. And these emails were first sent out a few weeks ago. They have a link in them that says, click on this, upload a copy of your ID, basically. However, that first round of emails, it only gave 7 days to respond. It went into a lot of people's spam folders. People didn't know to watch their emails. A lot of things happened. Some people say that they never received that email. And we've heard from a lot of people that DWS never actually sent them the email. They've checked their spam folders, etc. It's not there. And some people, again, discovered it over 7 days later, didn't know to look for it. In any case, DWS is supposed to be sending out a second round of those emails. They were supposed to start doing that last Monday. Again, we've been hearing from people that they aren't receiving those. I just want to stress, you need to be checking your emails regularly for this email. It should be coming from an email address called adws.uidentify@arkansas.gov. If it comes from that, I don't think it's going to be a scam. Hopefully, they aren't going to be a scam. But you need to actually click on the link inside that email. Do not upload it as a document to your PUA file or send it as a response to an email or anything like that unless you're specifically directed to by a DWS employee. I've heard, at least anecdotally, from people that have tried to upload their ID through those alternative methods in hopes of avoiding some scam, or because they haven't received that email already and they're trying to get things moving. At least anecdotally, that has made people take longer, because then that document, once it's been uploaded, they have to take time to review it. So use the actual link sent by DWS. Now, I understand a lot of people still haven't received that. And if you haven't received that at this point, I would recommend, and you're expecting to receive that email, I would recommend going ahead and calling the hotlines. That does lead to my next point, though. A lot of people have said that they are having trouble getting through on the hotlines. They are taking too long to get through. A lot of people are on the line for 2 hours, and then the line hangs up. They have to call back again. And of course, all over the news, there's been the extremely long lines for DWS local offices. Some people can't get to the offices in person or are prevented because of COVID. And some people have been sending emails with responses in some cases and not responses in others. In short, a lot of inconsistency in communication. The best advice that I can give you here is persistence. I know it's unfortunate. It stinks having to spend 8 hours a day to try to get through on a phone call. I feel for you there, but persistence is key here. And you need to document each and every attempt that you make trying to contact DWS in case it does become a problem later. So if DWS says, well, you didn't give us your ID, you say, not only did I not receive that email, but I tried calling on your hotline at X time on say March 1st, and then I tried again at Y time on March 1st, and then I tried again at another time on March 2nd, etc. It's harder to have that excuse later if you have that record. So keeping that record is key. We've also heard of a lot of reports of people being suddenly locked out of their PUA accounts or being listed as not eligible for a week without any form of explanation. If this has happened to you, again, you should call the PUA hotline until you're able to get through and confirm whether you have actually been denied benefits or whether they just need more information from you. Because we're hearing from some people whenever they do this that they're actually denied, and DWS just hasn't sent them a notice saying that they've been denied PUA officially yet. And we've heard from other people that they just needed to provide more documents, like they needed to provide a COVID impact statement or tax document or a different copy of their ID or a new unemployment denial letter. There are these various things that there hasn't been a lot of communication about what the reason people are getting locked out of their accounts are. So again, persistence is going to be key here. And just as a note there, a lot of people are experiencing really long wait times to actually receive their denial notices. But as was mentioned earlier by my colleagues, at least I think once, maybe twice now, you need to keep a lookout in your mail, check it daily, because you're only going to have 20 days from the date on a notice denying you benefits to file an appeal. And that, again, that's not 20 days from when you receive the notice, that's 20 days from when the actual date on the notice says. So if it says that it's a letter dated March 1st and you receive it March 8th, it's not 20 days from March 8th, it's 20 days from March 1st. And again, as been said, you can reach out to legal aid and request assistance if you have been denied benefits. But in the meantime, you should go ahead and appeal that as soon as possible because of those really short deadlines. Finally, probably the most common complaint that I've heard so far from people are the long wait times. And this has been throughout this process, frankly, but particularly in the last couple months, we've seen really long wait times for both actual decision making and the appeals process. So the most recent data that I've seen says that 94% of cases are taking over 50 days to make a decision. And that's just to make a decision whether you're eligible or ineligible. That's not the amount of time to get paid. That's not the amount of time of an appeal if you're denied ultimately. So at least 94% are taking over 50 days to make that decision. That said, if it's been 3 or 4 months, there might be something more wrong. There might be something else going on in your individual case that's causing that to take a longer time. And you're welcome to reach out to us with questions if you're in that sort of situation to figure out what's going on for why it's taking so long to get a decision. And I just wanted to say, if you're experiencing any of these issues, know that you're not alone. I have been hearing from a lot of you. We have been hearing a lot from a lot of you from phone calls, through media. There's been a lot of people that are experiencing these same problems. So with that, I think we're ready to enter into the Q&A.
Definitely have a good group of questions for us, and we thought we might, but I know Jaden's advice on persistence, unfortunately, that's going to be for a lot of them about all there is to offer, you know, and the truth is, in a lot of these cases, there are more questions than answers, but hopefully we have some insight that we can share, you know, but we are here working through these issues with folks, just the same as y'all are in some cases. So I know I'll just go ahead and fire off some questions here, and if y'all want to jump on them, feel free. But I know there's one, and I think it's worth answering, but there's several questions about, is there any time frame on review for applications?
So I'll take this one. There is officially in the federal guidelines, 80% of cases are supposed to be decided within 21 days. Now, obviously, with that other quote that I gave you earlier, with the most recent data that I've seen saying that 94% are taking over 50 days, that's not happening currently. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it ultimately boils down to the agency has a lot of claims coming in and they are not working as fast as those federal guidelines say. But unfortunately, that's because it's 80% of cases are supposed to be decided within that sort of timeline. There's not a whole lot that individuals can do about not meeting those guidelines.
So there were several questions about verifying ID. Now we do have Ms. Adria here from the Jonesboro Sun. She said, our benefits cut off until folks do verify their ID.
So I'll take this one again. They can be, and I've definitely seen some people having their benefits cut off for that reason. Again, like I said earlier, there are the limitations on that. You're not supposed to have to provide that ID if you provided it previously. But again, we're seeing a lot of people who are getting locked out of their accounts and such because they miss those emails, those deadlines to provide that identification.
Let's see here. I know we got a whole bunch of new ones coming in too, but let me cross check with our old ones. Now we did have one regarding the overpayments. This one said that last year they were approved for regular unemployment instead of UI, and then later denied, and now they're facing a $7,560 overpayment. It says that the Department of Workforce said that they were ineligible for. Let's see, I should have copied this, but ineligible for PUA. Is it too late now? Essentially, is what she's asking, to go back and get that, clarify that.
Is it too late to do what?
I'm trying to, the comments are moving so much. There we go. Okay, I got back to the original one. So she's looking at a $7,560 overpayment because she was technically not eligible for regular unemployment, but was eligible for PUA. But now I'm being informed it's too late.
Okay. I guess part of it depends on when you got the notice of overpayment. Like I said, there is a tight deadline, and so you would have needed to appeal. I'm not sure if you appealed within the deadline, or if something else happened. So part of it just depends on if you appealed timely, and then that way you could it would go to a hearing and you can explain it there.
And then someone else asked if an overpayment, and this kind of the same vein, if an overpayment from regular unemployment will prevent you from getting PUA. And certainly the answer there is no, as long as that's that's the big issue here, is in some cases there's an overlap of when you are actually eligible for one or the other. But just having an overpayment does not disqualify you from a subsequent PUA event. And I did, for folks, I did, you probably seen, but I did put that email address in the chat there, just to get written out. I know there was several questions about the ID, and that is your best chance. There was a question about whether you actually needed to go, was there a better option for verifying ID besides going into the local office? And ideally it would be getting that email and verifying it that way. Let's see here.
Hey, Trevor, I know when you were speaking, it
Mhm.
was a little higher up where someone ran into the issue of being told they couldn't apply to PUA until they were denied UI. And so I'll just jump in right there while you catch up with the question.
Yeah.
So the reason why they have this policy in place where you have to wait to be denied state unemployment before you can be eligible for pandemic unemployment is because they're essentially two different buckets of funding. So the federal government doesn't want to pay you if Arkansas, your state, is willing to pay you. So they wait for Arkansas to make the decision that you don't qualify for state unemployment before the federal government will essentially come in and then send you money. So that's really the basic understanding behind why they wait for Arkansas to deny you before they step in and say, okay, we will pay you under pandemic unemployment assistance. So, and I know that's very stressful because a lot of you have called us and said, I have not been denied or approved for state unemployment yet. And that does pretty much put you in a standstill because you cannot apply for PUA until you are denied traditional unemployment. So what is the solution to that? It really is a mixture of waiting, checking your emails, as Jaden said, checking your mail. And another issue that I have seen with a lot of our clients that have called us and reached out to us is that the address that they've provided hasn't been updated since they first initially submitted an application. So if you've moved, if you've, I don't know, if you've noticed issues with receiving your mail since the pandemic, you should reach out to your local workforce and see what address they have on file and make sure that those notices that they are sending you are actually coming to your address. So it could be something as simple as, oh, they may have sent it, I just didn't get it. So you just sort of, being a little playing detective in your own interest and making sure that whatever address, email address that they have on file is the one that you actually will be able to receive mail at.
Okay, let's see here. There's a question, I was receiving PUA since about April. In December, my weeks ran out and an extension came in, but I never received any payment since. But every week is approved. It's just stuck on approved. I've sent everything. What am I supposed to do? When I call PUA, people just tell me to wait, but what are we waiting for? So
again, unfortunately, persistence is going to be key here. There is, obviously long delays in payment decisions at every point in this process. There's just long delays. If you've called PUA and they say you've got everything, you're good to go, that's great. But if you call next time, they might tell you something different, frankly. So keep calling regularly, checking in to see if there's anything else you need from them. I would personally, if I were you, make sure that I was actually getting through the call, not just calling once a week, check on the status, make sure that a real person is looking at your claim there. And then other than that, there's unfortunately just nothing more to do. Just it's terrible, but I think that at that point you just got to wait.
Mhm.
And just to piggyback off of that, I would add, get substantial answers. If you feel, and one of my clients who, I mean, they've been waiting for a very long time, started to just keep a log. Every time they called, they put a date, and then they put what PUA or what workforce told them. So if you start to notice you're getting the same response of, oh, we just haven't, made a decision yet, it's still a pending decision. If you notice that you're still getting the same response, that's good. But like what Jaden said, if you notice you're getting a different answer each time, start keeping track of those responses. This is how you play your own detective. You're protecting your best interest, keeping a log of what they're telling you, so that if at the end of all of this, if they essentially say, oh, you've been denied, that you may potentially have a claim. Or if they say you've been approved, now you have a claim to say, well, I therefore qualify for all of these weeks because this is when my application was initially submitted, and this is when you told me I was approved. So keeping a record of this really is important. It's important for protecting your interests and for potentially protecting the amount of money that you could be eligible for at the end of the day.
I'll say I see a quick question in the chat. Someone just asked if the overpayment notices came at the same time as denial notices. And at least in every case that I've seen, those overpayment notices have come sometimes weeks, sometimes months after the fact. They do not, at least I have not seen a single case where they came at the same time. So make sure that you keep a lookout for any overpayment notices.
I agree with you there, Jaden. It's actually a client that I told when she called and told us that she just found out she was now being denied after she's been receiving for a length of time. I did warn her that you might want to keep a lookout for a potential overpayment notice, because it could come next week or it could come next month. But don't be alarmed. Just know once you get that letter, the clock starts ticking on when you can appeal it. So as Nikki stated during the initial discussion, those letters and those dates are very important because you do get a 20-day window to appeal. And correct me if I'm wrong, we have so many different cases that come on, says either 20 or 30, but I always err on the side of the shorter. So I'll say 20. You have 20 days to appeal, and you definitely want to take advantage of that as soon as possible. An appeal is it's as easy as one line, guys. It's one line sentence. You could write it, you could type it. I am appealing the decision attached, or I am appealing the decision. You insert whatever the decision is, the overpayment, the denial. Just one line sentence. I am appealing, insert. Sign your name, put your social security number on there, put your date of birth on there, so that they can know that that appeal is attached to that termination letter.
And
Right.
just to add to that real quick, make sure to keep a copy of that for your record so that you have a copy of it. And just, if you get an overpayment, please be aware that the termination of benefits and the overpayment are two separate issues that require two separate appeals. So if you get one, not the other, or you see the overpayment before you see the termination or whatever, just make sure to appeal both of those. And since it's two separate issues, it's two separate appeal windows. So it's 20 days from the date that you get the termination, and then 20 days from the date that you get the overpayment.
Right. And then I'll piggyback off of that too here for close, but there was one quick question. Is someone has been waiting since the middle of October for a decision, and should they get approved, would they get back pay? and yes, you would eventually get the back pay for that should you get approved, or I'm not sure if you were applying for UI or PUA, but if it's state unemployment, UI as I referred to it, and then you had to go back and apply for PUA, it's supposed to, through that guidance, backdate you to that date, as long as you qualified for PUA at the time. But I think, where we're closing, or, Victoria and Nikki's discussion here, that's a good point to kind of close it on. When should individuals call legal aid? And I know we've got Kevin in here with that question as well, but the best chance that we have, or when folks are welcome to call us and there's something meaningful that we may be able to provide, is when there has been a decision or an overpayment determination, and you have those appeal rights. Once you initiate those, you are certainly welcome to call us. That's when we can start looking at the case and look at what options there are to help you, and prepare for an administrative hearing, because that's finally when you get to present your case there, and someone at the agency will be listening. So, folks, keep in mind there that that's like I said, Jaden said, persistence, documentation, and then once you finally are fortunate enough to get that decision, give us a shout if you so choose. Now, anybody else, I know, like I said, we've been trying to piece together how they're handling these situations where you were applying for UI and then PUA after that for a different time period. If folks have worked through that in some way, that's something we would certainly be happy to hear from if you want to share, so that we can keep track of how those issues are going. But does anybody else have any other closing remarks for folks? Okay.
I think I would just add, I see a lot of frustration popping up in the chat, and we feel for you. There's a lot of cases where we wish that we could do more to help you. And there may be cases where if you call us, there is something that we can do. But I know there's a lot of frustration around this, and I just wanted to say we feel for you.
Well, hopefully this, we've provided some meaningful help answers here. And I know this is tied to our Facebook page, but if folks want to write down our helpline number, it's 1-800-950-92, or excuse me, I was getting a different number mixed up, but let me start that over. 1-800-952-9243. And that's, folks are certainly welcome to call there if they have those issues. But, this will be available on our Facebook page, so feel free to go back and go through it, share it with other folks, and hopefully there's some meaningful advice provided there. So I want to thank all my colleagues for joining us here, and hope everybody has a good night.